So now these Brazilian people, these two Baristo brothers that are mafiosos, they came over to the United States and they bought Swift and some of these really great companies we have here. So when you go to Publix and places like that, and you're buying a nice pound of hamburger and you're feeling good driving your Prius home, what you don't realize is the Baristo brothers not only are selling meat from Brazil, but they're the #1 company in the world for deforesting the rainforest. They're absolutely a criminal organization. And then they've also gone over to Australia and bought 2 of their largest packing companies. So if you look at, we import beef from Australia and Brazil and Canada and Mexico. Those are the biggest 4.
You mentioned to me also that they combine the meat in the United States with this foreign meat.
Their meat is so lean that it doesn't taste good for our Western diet. So what they do is they raise and kill these large animals in Brazil. They bring it over frozen, and they repackage it in the U.S. But before they do that, they mix our trimmings, and our trimmings have the fat content, and it sweetens the meat, and that basically is what they sell for the hamburger.
And why isn't that a good thing to merge all this meat together?
Well, they did a DNA on a 1/4 pounder of cheese, and they found over 1,021 different DNAs in that animal. So when you think of your exposure to the amount of, to have a disease or something from that many different DNAs in 1/4 pounder of hamburger, it's pretty scary.
It's pretty scary, and there isn't any packaging when you go to the grocery store, Publix. Does it say that on the front of the meat?
The big problem is basically disclosure. There is now, they have to, but it's only voluntary, put point of origin. So I think if Americans saw something that said this animal was raised in the United States and processed in the United States, we feel a lot more comfortable. Because obviously in a lot of those foreign countries, even though they claim to have the same trail of custody or the USDA processing inspections, they're very liberal with their antibiotics. They're very liberal with their steroids and stuff like that. I mean, Brazil is known as a corrupt country. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Mexico is known as a corrupt, country. A lot of these countries, even though we need the meat from them, we really can't control that end of it.
And what's the goal of these big 4?
Well, Brazil is, they want to control the Western diet. 500 million hamburgers a year are sold in the U.S. And that's what floats the boat. It's not the ribeyes and the strips. Hamburger.
And they benefit the most from the regulations?
They benefit big time from the regulations.
Any other type of regulations or anything that limits the ability of ranchers to provide beef? You mentioned something about the coming from Mexico and the United States that they're prevented from importing. Can you talk about that?
Well, we used to bring in about 1.2 million cattle into the Texan Panhandle from Mexico, and it was processed in the United States. It wasn't a bad thing. This actually was a really good trade deal. But the new worm, screwworm, is now in Mexico. What happened is in the 50s and 60s in the United States, the screwworm came. It's a fly that lays 3,000 eggs a year and actually embeds itself in the animal. You can get into people, dogs, it's just terrible. We eradicated that in the U.S. and pushed it all the way back to Panama. And for years, the United States would raise sterile flies, fly a plane in a thin strip between, and that would keep the flies at bay, and they didn't get up here. But what's happened is there's a lot of rumors, and again, they're rumors, but a lot of that, the screwworm has actually worked its way up to Mexico. So now, to preserve our cattle herds, we're not importing anything across the border. But again, what you're seeing is it's a really good thing for the Mexicans, because the Mexicans now are processing their own meat. And that's cartel money. It's dirty money, as we call it in the business.
And we saw the cartels get really in the airports just this week. There's a lot of violence and hostility in Mexico. Going to the price fixing and the market manipulation, which is what the administration is looking at, what have you seen, heard, or experienced from these big companies?
Everybody knows what they're doing. They're just really quiet about it. But it really breaks down to simply, if you have cattle, and I sell them in Okeechobee where we live at the open market, we have several people bidding on it. And that's called discovery. So you have a USDA report, there's 10 people, 4 people, 5 people, and the highest bidder wins. And what they do is these big packers, like the gentleman with the Rolex, he sits there and he sells animals to them.
He's a big packer.
Well, he's a feedlot, basically.
Feedlot.
He runs a feedlot. But what happens is, and when he was talking about selling larger animals he had to get rid of, after 30 months, they get so big and you can't process them with a bone in. Like you can't have a T-bone after an animal over 30 months old. So they get to a point where the feedlots hold them back and they get bigger and bigger. They're looking for more money and they get to a point where they have to sell them because they're just too old. I'm kind of different. I'm regenerative.
Let's pull up for the audience, those just tuning in. This is a live show, so I want to play this clip, which is the character from this video who is recorded, and set the context for this recording. This is a feedlot. For those who are not familiar, what does this guy do, the guy with the Rolex?
Well, you have the cow-calf operator, which is generally what I do. I have a cow and I have a calf from it. And then you have the backgrounder. He takes the calves and assembles loads, which is usually they try to be about 50,000 pounds within 25 pounds, whether they're black or steers or heifers. And then they go to a feedlot, and that's what he is. And he has a feedlot. It'll surround, like in Kansas, there's 10 of them. And they surround JBS and National, and they raise the animals basically anywhere from 90 days up to 180 days generally, and they fatten them on feed.
And this is not the work you do with the no hormones and regenerative and all that. They don't do that.
My animals enjoy a lot of space. It takes 4 to 5 years to raise a steer. My typical steers are about 1,200 pounds when they're finished. These animals are being slaughtered at 1,800 to 1,900 pounds, and they're done in 24 months generally because of the steroids, the antibiotics. They use the mash left from ethanol.
Yeah. So when I buy your product or a pound of it, what's the cost of your product versus a pound of the meat coming from that feedlot? Order of magnitude.
$1 or $2 difference, maybe.
That's not that much of a difference.
Not if you want to live.
But you can't mass produce your product compared to the way they do it.
Florida is one of the largest economies in the world. We have between 22 and 30 processing plants. It's almost a near impossibility to get a USDA processor. The problem of our company is the growth, because when you get to a point where you want to be bigger and service more people, and we don't have a lot of costs, we're pretty good at that. But when you get to that point, getting the meat processed is a problem.
Is there an economies of scale with what you do, or it's challenging because of the nature of how the animals are raised?
It's not. The raising the animals, there's so many great ranchers in the United States, and we just need more processing places.
More processing.
We do not have one facility that can process chicken USDA in the state of Florida. Now get your head around that.
Now why is that?
It's because what happens is you have to follow the money. The big packers write the protocol, and they give it to the USDA, and the USDA goes, here's this book, and it's about 18 inches thick. Now you have this book, and you have to have the same regulations, the same bylaw that these big packers have. Now when they're doing 8,500 animals a day or 10,000 animals a day, they can afford to have somebody in charge of light bulbs and this and that.
Yeah.
If you're a smaller place and you're doing 6 or 7 animals a day, it's almost an impossibility to abide by that. Just the paperwork alone is exhausting.
Let's go to the clip from the video of this gentleman who's on the feedlot. Let's play this one more time. Probably one of the most interesting characters we ran into, selling to JBS. Play the tape.
JBS, do you think they're doing price fixing at all, or?
I'm going to say yes to no. I'm going to say no because they don't have to, because they're in bed with their other two competitors.
Tyson.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm going to say yes and no. What does he mean by that?
Well, in one hand, he wants to say, yes, I don't like to sell them because they're corrupt and they don't do price discovery. So when I legally sell to them, I'm not allowed to disclose what I sold my animals for. Right? There's no 4 people bidding on it. There's just one company. He takes her. If he doesn't take it, they won't deal with him anymore. He'll be out of business. On the other hand, he likes the money he makes off of them because he's one of the few people to supply it, thus the Rolex.
Let's face it, healthcare is a mess. Outrageous premiums, surprise bills, denied claims, and now the rates are climbing again. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy, even for people with insurance. That's why I switched to Impact Health Sharing. No networks, no woke nonsense, just real savings and up to 50%. You can pick your doctor, there's no surprise bills, there's 24/7 telehealth, and maternity support. Take control of your healthcare before the system decides for you. Go to impactomg.com, that's impactomg.com, or call 855-378-6777 now. Impact Health Sharing, built differently.